Alright, welcome back to How to Build an F-14 Tomcat. The wing panels, they are essentially complete. Here you can see the top portion. Both of those panels have been installed. The bottom panels I showed you guys last video. I installed the panel on the wing root. And at the very beginning of the video, notice all this body filler over the tip. It's both the top and the bottom on both the left, or the right and the left wing. The what I'm planning on doing is I'll put a nice smear of body filler over the nav and the formation light and the panels that are making the tip of that, or make up the wingtip. I'll use my trusty little Makita palm sander with some 100 grit paper, and I'll just knock this down, start at the tip to get the shape right, and then I'll get the taper of the tip knocked down. I'll do that on both the top and the bottom. Once that's done, I'll tape off this whole area, shoot a couple coats of primer on it, engrave the frames for the formation and the nav light. I'll engrave those with probably a rotary file and just do it by hand instead of putting it in the Dremel. And then once that's done, I'll use some of my nifty little rivet and screw tools, and I'll actually burn the screws for the frames into the paint and the body filler. So both wings are essentially complete, other than that. Doing the slats, which I will do after I make the wing molds in the first wings. The reason why I'm waiting so long is I'm actually going to wrap the usable wings with fiberglass around the leading edge area here, and then I will build that up with balsa or styrofoam, and then get that the right shape. I'll glass over that, put the litho-plate detailing onto those plugs, and then I will use those plugs as the actual mold, to use those that I make to make the molds. And it'll be two pieces. I'll have the back side so it fits up nice and tight against the wing, which is the whole point in waiting to do that until we have the actual usable wings and the molds made. And then you'll have the other part that'll actually be the exterior portion of the slat, so it'll fit nice and tight up against the wing, fit it like a glove, and look just like the full scale. I did previously, I don't think I've ever shown these on video, but I do have a set of slats right there that are essentially exactly what the wing leading edge looks like right now if you didn't have the cutout for the slat. I haven't decided if I'm going to use those or not, because they may be just a tiny bit oversized. You can see the tape is off the nose cone and the fuselage. You'll see once the nose cone's on, you get a really tight fit. Still a little loose there than what I'd like, but overall I'm happy with that, and I'll leave it as is, and that'll get molded the way it is. So there's all that good stuff. Again, the fuselage, haven't done anything much. Basically, what I'm going to do on the nav and formation lights on the tips of the wings are exactly what I'm going to do on these forward portion of the fairings. The NACA duct I've cut out of this one already. This will cause a little bit of an issue molding this one, so I'm going to actually have to put another parting point here, and this will be molded as a separate piece, then put together and fiberglassed and molded in with the rest of it when the halves are joined. This one doesn't have that, so they can just get molded right down the center. Oh, let's see, what else have we done? And I figured I'd give you guys another little tutorial lesson, whatever you want to call it, on working with litho-plate. Here you can see we have the ventral fin. I just made one of these fins because they're identical side to side. Since the plug is handmade, there is a slight difference in contour along the bottom. That's something that that can get filled in when these are actually attached. So it's not a very big difference. It's just maybe a couple thousandths of an inch here in the center of it. So nothing too big, but just something to be aware of later on. So what I did is I kind of took my 3 views that I had, came up with the dimensions of this NACA duct on this ventral fin, and it didn't quite look, it was oversized in the width area, and it was a little higher and wasn't quite as long as what the 3 views showed, so I actually made it match the photos. Again, it's just one of those things where you kind of, even though the 3 views are just drawn by an artist, and who knows if he actually cares if it looks perfect or not, but that's what it looked like on the in the pictures I had of it. So that's how I cut it out. You can see what the 3 view originally looked like and how I ended up cutting it out. So on previous NACA ducts, like the ones here, these are actually stamped out of one piece of litho plate, and then the actual panel that covers over it, you can see the different colors. This is where it was annealed a lot to get the stamp without creasing and everything. So that's why this is kind of a brown color, and the rest of it I just cut kind of a triangle to cover the shape of it to make it open for the NACA duct. The way I did those is I drew up the NACA duct on a piece of plywood, just 1/4 inch ply. So I drew up the shape of it, and then I cut it out with the trusty scroll saw over there. And then I took what I cut out, I put on top of another piece of scrap 1/4 ply. And here you see I just traced around it, drilled a hole in the middle, again cut out the outline of it with a scroll saw. And then I took the first piece we cut out and I just glued it in there at a slight angle so it pops up with a NACA duct. And then from a company called Smooth On, I got some 2-part liquid urethane rubber, and I used to use this particular rubber compound for making tires, but it's a 90 durometer, and I mean this stuff is hard as a rock. I mean it's harder than a car tire, and when it hits your foot, when you drop it, it hurts. So what I did is I took this block, I just made a little balsa frame around it, just using some scrap balsa, and then I mixed up the rubber, sprayed the wood down with this. It's kind of like PAM really, but it's a special compound. It's basically a mold release that they use. It's just in a little aerosol can. I think it's like $8 for a can. Sprayed the inside of it down with that. It's actually still oily from that. And that was over, God, that was 2 years ago. So anyway, I sprayed the whole inside of that area down with that mold release spray. Poured the rubber down in there, and then after it was done, I broke the balsa box off from around it to where all you're left is with the rubber and the 1/4 inch, the plug basically. So what you get when you pull it apart is you get the male and then a female portion that's basically identical. And then what you do is I would take a piece of litho plate, I would place it over the aluminum or over the rubber, take the panel down and just hand press it down in there. Let me see if I've got a scrap piece to try. This isn't really, I'll show you what happens when you use a non-annealed piece. So there's the aluminum or the litho, hand stamp it, and you can see it kind of leaves a nice little indentation, but you can see the crease marks there at the back portion of it, and then there's the opposite side. So what happens when you don't anneal it is, let me get the camera here on the tripod. Bring it a little closer for you guys to see. Now that I have that, I'm going to put the wood back down, and I'm going to take my trusty little body hammer and just beat the snot out of it. And you can see what happens is it makes a nice little NACA duct, but it just wreaks havoc on it. Actually, it just cuts it all up. So that's why you anneal it, because you end up tearing the metal. Grab the torch and I'll anneal a piece real quick. Again, with this, we're just gonna heat it up till you see the color change. You guys might be able to see it a little bit better with this piece with all the print work on it. Again, you don't want to stay in one spot, or actually you'll start to melt the litho-plate sheet. So you just want to work it. And even when making these small NACA ducts, you want to anneal a very large portion of it. So those little creases that started to build, they'll actually work their way away from the NACA duct, so you actually don't start a stress crack. And sometimes you actually have to do this 1 or 2 times to get it. While it's still hot, I'm gonna put it down, hand stamp it, and these take a little bit of getting used to. Here you can see nice little NACA duct, no holes in it, but you got all these creases. Now that we've actually hand stamped it, all these creases are as hard or harder than the original litho plate. So you actually have to anneal it once again to get these creases out. And even then they don't come out completely. But if you don't do this the second time, you'll just end up getting the exact same results you did with the non-annealed piece. And again, you notice I'm going around the entire, even larger around the area than what I did the first time to anneal this thing. Again, that's just so you don't get any stress concentration around those creases. So now we've got that. Again, put it down in place. Left with a nice one. And this is where you can take your roller, if I can find mine, since I have apparently misplaced it. There we go. And you can actually take your roller and roll along the perimeter of it to help get rid of even more of those creases. And again, this is kind of work hardening the metal as we do this. This little wood and rubber tool I made for this, you can pretty much use it for any particular model. It's not F-14 specific. I made it NACA duct specific. So as long as the NACA duct you're trying to make is the same size as this one, you can make up pretty much any NACA duct out of it. So here we'll take our scissors and we'll just cut the duct out. I'm just going to cut a big chunk of it, aluminum out away from around it. And you can see it's kind of curved, but you can still see where those ridges used to be. But looking from the side, there's absolutely no ridges whatsoever. All those ridges were just, you shrunk the metal in one spot and expanded it in the other, so it's nice and smooth. There's here on the back side, there's a little bit of a wavy, you can feel a little bit of the ridge right here, but that's one NACA duct. I mean, y'all saw it firsthand. That maybe took, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. So that's an easy one, because there were so many of them that size. I could just make this tool, and I literally popped out, I don't know, probably half a dozen of these things, even after ruining 5 or 6 of them, and made another half a dozen usable ones in less than an hour. So when they're all one size, they're nice and easy to do. The problem comes when you get ones that are oddball shaped, like that one on that ventral fin. You really kind of, you got to play around with it. You're going to waste a lot of litho plate. Here I've got 4 pieces that I've already annealed that are ready for the attempts. So while we're here, I'll get started on the first attempt while you guys can sit back, enjoy, and have a good laugh. Grab a beer. It's probably going to take a while. Beer. If you're not old enough, get a Coke, Pepsi, whatever your drink of choice shall be. So what I'm doing, I've got the annealed litho-plate. I've got the ventral fin with it already cut out. What I did is when I drew it out, I just took a worn down fiber disc and a Dremel, went around the edges, crisscrossed inside of it, used a screwdriver to pry that out. This has a 16th inch balsa core and then balsa on either side. So I just went down to the core plywood to get the depth of it. And then I just took, I believe it's a 3/16 hardwood dowel, and I just rounded the tip of it off. And then I left the other end nice and flat. So with the litho plate, we'll just come in and just kind of push it inside the NACA duct with your fingers at first, and you'll see the shape starting to come into play. You take your dowel and use that to help get it into some of the corners. The reason why you want to round the tip of that dowel is so you don't actually use it like a razor blade and cut through the litho plate. So now I'm just I'm not putting a lot of pressure, just a little bit to hold it, to get it into the corners. And you can either push it or you can pull the dowel. Either way, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to use the flat end here to kind of help. I'm not putting near as much pressure now as I was with the rounded end, just because I'm using the 90-degree edge and I don't want to cut into the litho plate. So there we've got essentially the beginnings of that NACA duct. Now at this point, I've worked it a pretty good bit, so I don't want to. This one's actually turned out a lot better than the first one I attempted a few minutes ago. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to re-anneal this. That way I don't destroy it. The annealing process is just kind of one of those things you gotta. After you've done it a few times, you know when the metal needs to be redone. It's always better to, if you worked it in any kind of tight spaces like I just did, it's better to err on the safe side and go ahead and re-anneal it after you've already worked it a little bit. And with some of these where they don't have much printing on the backside, it's a little more difficult to determine when's a good time. And if your torch is a little too hot, you'll actually see the metal will start to get really soft because it's melting. So as long as you keep a nice little circular movement and keep moving around the piece, you should be alright and not melt the metal. There you can see that one little corner right here started to melt just because the torch was a little too hot. I mentioned in one of the previous videos that on some of the portions that I made that use really softened metal, to make sure to sand these down so they're smooth. I've already hit this with my little Makita sander with 100 grit paper, so it's nice and smooth all around the NACA duct area. Alright, so that's cooled off. We'll put it back into position here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the roller, and I'm actually going to go around the forward portion of it. On this particular duct, I wasn't looking for perfection as far as depth and all. I was just looking to simulate it, that it was actually there, but I didn't want to just simulate it with a flat opening. I wanted it to actually be three-dimensional. I mean, there's no point in, it doesn't make much sense to me at least, to simulate something and just do it two-dimensionally when it takes just a little bit more effort to do it three-dimensionally. And after all, once you do it once, you don't have to do it a second time, because all of this detail will be transferred to the molds, which will transfer them to your next part. And each individual part after that. So do it once and bask in the fruits of your labor for the rest of the whatever you do, as far as kit wise, whether you do one or whether you do 100 or 1,000 or whatever. Alright, so now we've got the front portion done. You can see there's a little bit of a wrinkle here at the front. I'll work that out once I get this back portion completed. Another thing, when you do these, you want to make sure that you don't get what they call a negative draft. What happens when you get a negative draft is the sides are actually, you get like a, I guess an acute angle, and then when you make your molds, that acute angle actually locks your part into the mold so you can't get it out. So I've made sure doing this that I'm not pushing it all the way up under the fiberglass by compressing the balsa under the fiberglass. I'm kind of just keeping a nice little dish shape to the part, or to the edges of it at least. And sometimes you'll get really big creases like this one right here. Since this is actually going to get covered by another piece of litho plate, I probably won't worry about it. I'm going to try and get rid of as much of it as I can, but sometimes you just can't get rid of it and you have to kind of deal with it. So once again, we'll anneal the part. And what I'm going to do is, instead of actually putting it back in the part, I'm going to put it on the edge of the table and I'm going to roll it flat. And sometimes you just kind of got to work with it and do this a couple times. Put it back in the part, shape it, pull it out, put it on the edge of the table, shape it, and just keep repeating that until you get rid of that crease. Some guys could have probably done this whole panel, the NACA duct and all, in one portion, but I don't think I'm quite that good yet. Even though I've been working with this stuff for a few years now, there's still a lot to learn. And again, we'll anneal it. The guys who have been following this build from the very beginning, this will give you guys this let you understand why it's taking so long to get to the point to where it's at right now. It's a long and tedious process of just getting oddball parts like this made up and installed. This time I'm going to anneal the whole end portion of it. And you'll notice now the whole piece is kind of taking that's kind of got a bronzish brown color to it, just because it's been softened up so many times. And even with as many times that we've annealed it, or I have, there's already a little bitty crack starting to form in this back corner here. So this, it's not trash. I'll still use it as long as that crack doesn't propagate any further. I think this should be the last little bit of work this one needs in order for it to be considered done.
So there is one more completed NACA duct. For installation on this thing, I'm just going to take scissors, and I'm not going to cut it all the way up against it. I'm going to cut maybe a 1/16 to 3/32 inch frame around it. And amazingly, I did not have to use all 4 pieces for this part. So I got a little lucky on that. Then I'm just going to round the edges. Well, not necessary, it's just kind of common habit with me. Everything on the full scale airplanes I work on and fly, it's always rounded, so it's just something I always carry over to models. So there we have it. One NACA duct for the ventral fin. With it in position, kind of cutting it out, kind of messed up the outline of it around it, so we'll put it back in, roll it down flat again, and here you see, once it's installed, it looks just like a NACA duct. And then from the beginning, or from the front here, you can see it'll just like it should. So that's how you make NACA ducts with litho-plate. Honestly, I can't think of much else you can or can't do with this stuff. You can probably do just about anything. I've seen guys make boats out of this stuff by riveting it together, which just looked phenomenal. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Here you can see I've already got the panel for that made up. So all I have to do is put it in position. After this is glued in place, cut the portion for the NACA duct out and glue it in. If you're wondering how I'll do that, I'll take just some tracing paper once again. Put that down so it doesn't, with the contact adhesive, touch it. So I'll just glue that into position or tape it into position. Take a regular old ballpoint pen, and I'm just going to trace, or just trace the outline of it onto the tracing paper. The front you want to be a little bit longer than where it actually is. That way you can push the panel down into it a little bit, so it makes a nice little even transition into it. So there's that. I'll take this piece off. I'll actually cut this out now. I'm just going to use a straight razor blade and just trace along the lines. Take that back out. Then we'll take the tracing paper, just line it back up, tape it back into position, fold it back, then take your panel. This particular one I want to overlap slightly more on the bottom than the top. Once the panel is in place, just take a little piece of tape, and just tape it so it holds its position. Then take the tracing paper, fold it back over. You can see the tape's in the way, so I'll just trim that out of the way. I knew that would happen. And there you have the NACA duct paper template in position. Then take your Sharpie marker and just trace the outline of it onto the litho plate. And when you get to this back portion, since the ventral fin kind of has a taper to it, you just want to make sure you push the litho plate down so it contacts the actual ventral fin structure. That way you get the right shape. It shouldn't change much, but better safe than sorry. And then to cut it out, you just replace it. You just copy what you did on the tracing paper. Just take a straight edge razor blade and work your way around it. And that's basically it. Not difficult, just time consuming. So that's the 3 parts for the most complicated portion of the ventral fin. You can see I've already done the other side. I got to put a little piece here on the trailing edge, and then there at the top of it. And then the ventral fin will be complete as well. So the only thing left are those pesky nav and formation lights and the rest of the fuselage. So lots of work done and lots to go. So that's gonna be my last video for the night. I'm going in and getting some dinner, probably order a pizza, who knows. For those of you at home with the families, spend some time with them, get a good weekend, a good night's rest, and for those of y'all have good enough weather to go flying tomorrow, have fun and don't crash anything. Y'all have a good one.